Okay, so we're going to do a quick review of tissue adaptation times and what they mean when you're training any athlete, particularly a very young athlete. Okay, when I was a young vet, we did a lecture on why you have to be very careful training young animals, and in particular why you shouldn't race young horses, and of course everybody does, and a lot of them end up at the glue factory for good reason. So they taught us about tissue adaptation times, which is actually quite interesting. Bone, muscle and ligament turn over 50% of their cells in between 8 and 12 weeks, and that's what's known as a tissue adaptation time. What's amazing is that tendon and cartilage, it takes at least 12 months to replace 50% of your cells. So the tissue adaptation time for those particular structures is very, very slow, and it makes them very prone to injury, and if they get injured, it takes even longer to get over than any of these other tissues. Okay, they're very important, and particularly in young animals, because they not only have the cartilage in their joints, which is young and it's got more fluid and it's more spongy than when you get older, but they also have in their bones, you have growth plates, and they're partly cartilage as well. In fact, they're basically cartilage and they become bone over time. So you have to be aware of that when you're training young animals of any kind, and that includes young humans, rowers. Okay, so cartilage, the structure is like a mattress. You have big molecules of collagen, which are a triple helix. So probably everyone knows about a double helix that's in DNA. Collagen's a triple helix, so it's really like a spring, all right? So it's lots of molecules of collagen, like a spring, and then a background of ground substance, which is hyaluron and glycosaminoglycans, you hear about glucosamine, all those sorts of things. They're in the background. All of them are very, very hydrophilic molecules. They act like a sponge. They suck water onto them electrically, and it's actually easily dehydrated, and that's a very, very important thing, is that repeated compression, as you know, if you're walking around a long time, your knees get sore or whatever, it's because the cartilage gets sore, because it's dehydrating gradually. And in particular, your spinal discs are cartilage as well. They've got a ring of fibrocartilage on the inside. They've also got a jelly, like a jelly bean of gel cartilage on the inside called the nucleus pulposus, which is just like having a jelly bean inside a ring of strong cartilage. If you look at it from the side, this is a ring from above, okay? So as you get older, this jelly gets harder and harder and actually finally disappears, unfortunately, probably in me for that matter. But your rower is moving up and down, and these cartilages in the spinal disc, they're taking a lot of load. Now on a boat, when you're rowing in a boat, you've got 17 kilos or so moving backwards and forwards to you, the same as you have on the Row Perfect, okay? When you're rowing on a fixed machine, that doesn't move at all, it just stays there. You're effectively rowing on a boat that weighs the same as the rest of the earth, or it weighs at least a few tons. And so that means when you're at the end of the stroke, you've got between 30 and 50 kilos, depending on how big you are, moving backwards at a high rate. On a fixed erg, it's 1 to 2 meters per second. Okay, for a big guy rowing hard, he's moving backwards at 2 meters per second. In a racing boat or on indoor sculler, the maximum speed would be 0.3 of a meter. It probably actually isn't even that, but it's obviously about 6 times lower. So you don't have that force moving backwards, which always has to result in a shear force and a compression force at the finish of the stroke when you're rowing hard on a fixed machine. You need to be very aware of that, and particularly when you're talking about young people who have, as I said, more spongy cartilage. They hold more water. Their cartilage is softer, more elastic. We've all seen why they can play, sport the way they can. But if you're asking that cartilage to be repeatedly compressed, it will dehydrate. It has to. There's no other possible way for it to go. The molecules don't hold the water in a strong way. It's not in a solution. It's not bound to them. It's just an electrical charge on all these molecules back in our little mattress of cartilage that is dehydrated by repeated stress. So it's really important when you're training a young athlete, you understand the implications of that and why you have to be very careful with the training loads you put on them, because otherwise you're going to end up with injury. And if you end up with injury, that's your recovery time, 12 months. So you need to be really aware of that, and you need to be responsible for that. The other thing you actually have to understand is that if cartilage is properly damaged, it never heals. Actually never heals. You put a cut into a piece of cartilage when you're doing surgery, you go back 12 months later, the same cut's there, okay? It may recover in some time in some joints if you get some bleeding inside and it'll get some fibrous tissue, but the actual cartilage doesn't heal at all. So understand that. If you understand your tissue adaptation times, you can understand how to set loads and how you have to be very careful with the type of training loads that you put on young children or any young animal. Okay, so that's tissue adaptation time and implication for rowing machines.